Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about episode 2 of Connect. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we got a fuller context to some extent of Dong-Su's circumstances as a kid. I think that whole beginning part where it seemed like it was set in present day, and the fact that he was checking his body, I'm assuming it's immediately after he escaped those guys from slicing, after they sliced his, or was in the process of slicing his body up. Well, to be fair, they did slice his body, but still. And he's thinking about the first time he was called a monster. Like, he fell out of a tree. And it's like, right, I knew his body snapped back into place, but this is the first time we saw, like, whatever it is inside of him, what makes him what he is, crawled out of his body and, like, snapped everything in his body back into place. That's understandable why the kids were like, it's not just your body snapping back into place, it's all the tentacle tendrils coming out that made them go like, oh my god, you're a monster. So picking up where the last episode is left off, he's looking for Jin Seop, but it's something I didn't even, think about last episode is, right, he's only seeing things from the view of his eye. Like, he isn't in direct connection with Jin Seop's body. He can see what Jin Seop sees out of that one eye, but obviously, he doesn't have control, so he can't hear what Jin Seop hears. So he's, never seen what Jin Seop looks like, nor does he know what the sound of his voice is. Because they've said his name around him, but unless Dong-Su gets really good at reading lips, he's not going to be able to figure that out. I mean, sadly, he bumped into the guy early in the episode, but once again, he's got a first-person view, so he never knows what the character actually looks. I mean, what Jin Seop looks like. He runs into Sunhee and one of their coworkers. And he, because, he was like scratching his eye and he took the eye patch off and it freaked him out. Then, later on, he's following them so he can find Jin Seop. I mean, he wasn't following them necessarily, but he saw when he took off his, when he heard the song again, he saw, the lady across from Jin Seop, and it's like, okay, focus, where are you? And he looks and sees exactly where they are. But by the time he got there, once again, he bumped right past Jin Seop, which is so crazy because his friend, the coworker, was like, hey man, Sunhee likes you, but I'd like to ask her. I was like, go ahead. He has no attachment to her. It's super obvious that she likes him. And it's like, Dong-Su showing up like that. It's like, oh man, you showed up at the wrong time. You walked past the guy that has your eye, who's the serial killer. And on top of that, they think you're some weirdo because he's asking questions like, who was that guy that was across from you that was sitting here? But, he's an awkward human being. I think it's also how do you approach that situation? He could have handled that a lot better, but he's not thinking. He's just kind of going I gotta find this guy. I'm not thinking things through. So that kind of blew up in his face. Also, I didn't realize that picture last episode of the kid with the, that looks like, this is a cutout of a kid in between two parents. I didn't know, I thought that was Jin Seop's picture. I didn't realize that was Dong-Su's picture. I mean, at least that's what the opening made it seem like. I didn't realize that. I didn't piece that together. I for whatever reason, I thought it was Jin Seop's picture. But I guess it kind of makes sense. Maybe he probably, maybe his parents gave him up for adoption, and maybe he was in the foster care system. So when he was around all those kids playing, that was probably him in the foster care system. So he probably, because it did come up at one point. It's the lady who's in astrology and all that was like, what's your birthday? And obviously he's focusing on the case, but he's like, I have a question. But he did kind of hesitate. So part of me is like, and I think he said, well, I was like, if you were in a foster care system, you might not actually know when your actual birthday is, depending on when you got dropped off. So maybe that's his way of being like, I want to pretend his way of handling, no one ever probably taking him in really. So it's here are my parents. I want to pretend like I had a decent, normal childhood, even though I've never been normal. Like I said, we've seen him as a kid and he's had this thing, so maybe he's born with it. There's still so much he doesn't know about his history, especially if he was in a foster care system. But he went to go see the astrology lady, and she told him about the symbols. That, once again, that Jin Seop has a very, specific way he plans on killing and for a specific amount of time. It's all obviously tied to astrology. The symbol that we've seen carved into the bodies is essentially it looks like a P standing for Pluto, which I thought was interesting because I'm like, huh. It's like, well, Pluto's not a planet anymore, so I thought that was interesting, but maybe it still has its role in some shape or form when it comes to astrology. Maybe it's still counted as a planet in the astrology, even though science doesn't count it as one anymore. I don't know. Not unless that's something that's changed, but I don't know. It's just one of those interesting things in life. You grow up thinking Pluto's the ninth planet in our solar system, and it's like, nope. Anyway, tangents and all that aside. But it's basically Pluto and Venus have to be like, be in the same circle on the astrological chart, and it basically means they're in conjunction with each other. So, and it's very specific dates, and those dates correlate to the murders. So the next one it was going to be on Christmas, which it is. But I also thought, I was like, oh, it's not making much of a... But it's like, right, like Christmas isn't really celebrated like that in Korea, I don't think. Because I feel like I've read manhwa that have talked about, or at least even webtoons that have talked about. I forgot, because I was like, yeah, I was like, think about it. I was like, oh yeah, it's December 25th in this, and with the fourth murder, but I was like, oh, there was no like Christmassy fanfare, but I'm like, yeah, I'm coming at that from the perspective of being like an American, so I kind of forget. I was like, because I don't think like that's celebrated in like Korea, you know. I know, like I think in Japan they have like, isn't it? No, I was about to say White Day, but isn't that tied to Valentine's Day? Tangents and all this. I'm going on a tangent. I'm so sorry. Focusing back. The fourth murder was going to be on the 25th, which it was, but the final one is going to be on the 6th. So it's like, if you don't stop this guy now, like, he's going to commit a murder and he's just going to disappear, because it's all about this cycle. Because like Venus, Pluto is supposed to be about, God, I'm switching it up. I'm getting it wrong in my head. Because one's supposed to be about art and beauty, and the other one's supposed to be about destruction. So it's very befitting and poetic that it's like, hey, these murders, which are destruction, are done in like this terrifying but beautiful art type of way. You know, once again, why this is his shtick, why like this particular way he goes about murdering people, I have no idea. Maybe we'll kind of deeper dive on it later on, but obviously the cops ended up getting a heads up. I guess Detective Choi like had his friend her look out for anyone that would come in asking questions. I guess he had asked about the symbol, and she's like, yeah, my friend, that Detective Choi, my friend was just in here not too long ago asking about it. So she contacted him, and obviously she's like, oh yeah, that this guy came in, young and handsome. They're like, come on, focus. She's like, oh, he had an eye patch, and they showed her pictures like, handsome, and they're just like, come on, stop it already. I love it. And it's like, okay, he's a suspect, but they don't know for sure if he did it, but they do, like, they're trying to backtrack him, like follow him on some probably surveillance cameras to find out where he was, because when he first showed up at that place to talk to the lady about the astrology, they like kept in, like, they watched the tapes back just to see where, well, I mean, it's most likely digital, so it's probably not physical tapes, but you get what I'm saying. They watched the security footage back to see him come in, but they probably still haven't figured out where exactly he came from. Like, you probably have to follow him on every surveillance camera in nearby businesses or buildings or whatever, so. Then you have Sunny showing up at Jin Seok's place, and you're like, oh boy. And the moment she's at his place, I was like, when she went in the fridge and got one of the water bottles, I was like, when she closed the door, I was like, oh, I was super expecting him to be on the other side of that. And the moment she like went through his drawings, I'm like, oh my God, you're going to get killed. I was like, wow, I'm surprised. I was like, I thought they were going to set you up to be like a later kill, if not the final kill. And then it's like, oh, but then like the next murder happened. It's like, oh, he killed her. But then there was a wheelchair. I was like, wait. And I was like, oh, it's an older lady, which he was drawing earlier in the episode. because we do see him kind of pick out his victims, because while he was at that place, it seemed like he had targeted his next victim. Like, he probably gets them well in advance, gives himself time to target them, like probably learn enough about them so that he can get them in a very isolated situation. Because he had focused on this lady and there was like a red aura about her. Now, the question is that the kind of killer instinct in him being like, boom, I'm taking like almost like a mental picture of boom, like there's a giant X on you now because you're my next target? Or is that supposed to be more so like, no, she doesn't fit what I need, you know? I don't know how to interpret that. I feel like it could be interpreted either way. I initially interpreted it as like, oh, you're my next target. I guess his next piece had already been done. Like, the fourth murder had already happened. Like, there's no telling. I mean, there's a lot of prep necessary for these, so. But, yeah, when soon he was okay, I was like, oh, okay. Sonny. When soon he was okay, I was like, oh, okay. I was like, and she's piecing it together. She's like, oh my God, did he do this? And she got her coworkers help. I was like, at first I was almost like, wait, are you actually okay with this? Like, cause we saw online, there's some people who are fans of all this. It's like, oh my God, this is god awful, but it's beautiful. So I was wondering if this was going to happen with Sonny. It turns out that's not the case. She was trying to get him to confess on her own. I guess she didn't want to make the accusation and go through this whole rigmarole of getting the cops involved. Because for one, let's not forget, this is the guy she likes. Even because when she first came over, she was like, I know everything there is to know about you. I'm like, wait, do you actually know? But she's like, I want you to get to know me first. And then they like banged it out. But it's like, oh, okay, so you were meaning that, like, we've been working together for so long. I see you all the time. Like, I know you. It's like, you really, really don't. And it's so sad, you know, that things came down to what they did. Not only did the coworker get killed, and like the moment they confronted him about everything, he just laughed. And Jin Seop, like, put a jacket over her face and then punched her and knocked her out. You're like, Jesus. And he started whooping his other coworker's ass, beating the crap out of him, then throw him off the side. He didn't just hit the ground. He banged against the building and then splat and hit the ground. You're just like, Jesus. And then what did he do? Son, he is like, no, I'll do whatever you want. He's like, okay, I need you to be silent. And then puts the coat over her head and then snaps her neck. You're like, fuck, dude. I was like, wow. I legitimately didn't expect her. I was like, maybe she's going to be like the final kill and you're going to try and save her, but she's going to die. It's like, nope, she's straight up dead. It's like, wow. And he can shift that to be like home dude, he killed her and then he jumped off the side of the building and killed himself because, oh my God, I was so in love with her. I accidentally killed her. I can't live with myself. Boom. Like, the stage is set for him to even the position things to be that way. I mean, it's like, yeah, home dude's got wounds on his face like he was beat up. Maybe the argument could be like, oh, those are self-defense wounds. But also he hit the ground and there was an explosion of blood. So the argument could be like maybe his face, it's like upon impact, his head exploded. So his face might be, for lack of a better term, mush. And you won't see the physical wounds on his face like he was beat up. So I don't know, maybe that's how Jin Seop gets around. I could see that easily being a very easy cover-up job, but we'll have to wait and see on that front. But circling back to Dong-soo, he wanders upon the next crime scene, and obviously the detectives don't notice him until the guys who are trying to slice up his body going after him. And the main dude with like the hatchet, it's like, oh, because when he cut off his arm, he's like, go ahead, like reattach it. Once again, gives me like Resident Evil 7 vibes. And it's like, go ahead and heal yourself up. And he doesn't. He's like, oh my God. So you're a connect, which for Dong-soo, it's like, that's the first time he's ever heard that. So it's like, they know what he is, interestingly enough, because that had come up before about like, oh, like someone looking into and looking up I guess, this is a known thing in some circles, but once again, Dong-soo potentially doesn't know his family, so he wouldn't know where he comes from. So all of this is just something he's lived with. He doesn't know that it's a not well-known thing, but known in enough in some capacity, you know? So, but luckily for him, Irong shows up to help him out. And it's like, right, if you want to kill these guys, because the last thing you want is these guys who know all about your circumstances, about you being a connect, you might want to kill them. But for him, it's like, I've never killed anyone. I'm not about to do that. So it's interesting to find out like why she has such an interest in them. 'Cause I was about to say, it doesn't seem like she's won, but still, I'm curious to see what that's all about. And obviously, she still doesn't also know all there is to know about Dong-Su's situation, because when he was there at the building, like, tracking down the killer, and he was kind of freaking out, she didn't know what was going on, because she doesn't realize, like, well, they don't know enough about each other yet, but I'm sure they'll get to know each other pretty soon, so. Some very, very interesting circumstances. Some of the detectives that were with Detective Choi arrested one of the guys that was after Dong-So, so it's like, he probably won't crack or give any answers. He'll probably be let go, but yeah, that's definitely gonna be interesting to see what happens on that front too. I mean, they're looking at him as a person of interest. They don't fully think he's a suspect. Because I would also make the arguments like, well, if he knows about all this, why would he, like, go ask someone about this stuff if he already knew about it? But maybe because they're like, right, wasn't public enough knowledge, so how did he know? It's like, well, he knew because he saw the markings on the body, so. I wonder, does this throw things off, because he's very particular. Jin Seok is very, like, particular about, like, his killings and stuff like that. Like, right, the fourth murder happened, and technically he's got 2 more under his belt. But maybe it's for him, it's like, any killings in between is fine, but as long as I complete the ritual of these killings on these very specific days, he has 1 more day, and it's going to be the end of the cycle. Not unless it, because it's about like, because one of the symbols was about regeneration or something like that too. So, but I don't think it's like the cycle repeats itself, but I think it's just going to be, he's going to get his final kill, and that's going to be the end of whatever ritual he's trying to perform, like whatever purpose this serves. Because even though I think Detective Choi said it's like, right, they got 10 days until the 6th to kind of, stop all this. Maybe that was a mistranslation, because it's like, no, it's definitely more than 10 days. It was like 12 days, but maybe that was, well, maybe it was a situation of the body was discovered on the 25th, and maybe it was or maybe the body was there on the 25th, and at that point it was the 27th. Maybe that's what that was. I don't know. I'm just probably getting mixed up. Whatever the case, maybe it's kind of irrelevant. So, like I said, I guess as long as he performs the killings what he needs to do them, like, on the respective days, any killings in between is just kind of icing on the cake, I guess. I mean, in their case, it's like, right, I needed to cover my tracks because you knew too much. But, like I said, I wasn't sure how that situation on the roof was going to play out in that regard. I did not expect that. So, well, ultimately, like I said, we'll have to wait to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.